The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was a marvel of engineering. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive station built from metals that shimmered in colors no human eye had ever seen before. Inside, representatives from 412 species gathered every cycle to discuss trade, borders, and the endless small conflicts that arose when so many different peoples tried to share one galaxy. Ambassador Vexstar of the Drell Collective stood near the main entrance, his four eyes scanning the crowd. The Drell were a proud species, tall and covered in thick scales that ranged from deep blue to bright green. They had been members of the Council for 3,000 years, and Vexstar had served as their ambassador for the last 40 of those years. In all that time, he had seen many strange things. He had watched wars begin and end. He had seen species rise to power and others fade into history. But he had never seen anything quite like what he was seeing today. A new species was being introduced to the Council. This was not unusual by itself. New species were discovered every few cycles, as the galaxy was vast and full of life. Most of them were simple creatures, barely able to build fire or craft basic tools. A few were advanced enough to travel between stars, and these were the ones who eventually found their way to the Council. Today, one such species had arrived. They called themselves humans. Vexstar studied the human delegation as they entered the Great Hall. There were 5 of them walking in a tight group. They were smaller than he had expected, averaging only about 2 meters tall. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink, and they had hair on their heads in colors ranging from black to yellow. They walked upright on 2 legs, which was common enough, but their bodies looked soft and fragile. No scales, no shells, no thick hide. Just thin skin stretched over muscle and bone. Prey species, Vexstar muttered to himself. It was not meant as an insult, simply an observation. The galaxy was divided into 2 broad categories, predator species and prey species. Predators were those who had evolved as hunters, with sharp claws, powerful jaws, and aggressive instincts. Prey species were those who had evolved to be hunted, developing speed, camouflage, or strong breeding capabilities to survive. The humans clearly fell into the second category. They had no natural weapons that Vexstar could see. Their teeth were small and blunt. Their nails were short and flat. They had no venom, no spines, no armor of any kind. They were soft, slow, and vulnerable. This assessment was shared by most of the Council members present. Tar could see them whispering to each other, their various communication methods filling the hall with a low buzz of sound. The Threks were clicking their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The Volcari were exchanging knowing glances with their large, reflective eyes. Even the normally stoic Mondari were shifting slightly, their massive stone-like bodies moving in what might have been amusement. The humans seemed unaware of the attention they were receiving, or perhaps they simply did not care. Their leader, a female named Sarah Chen, walked at the front of the group with her head held high. She wore a simple dark uniform with minimal decoration, unlike the elaborate robes and armor worn by most Council members. Her expression was calm, almost relaxed, as if she were taking a pleasant walk rather than entering the most powerful political body in the known galaxy. "They do not seem to understand their position," said a voice beside Vexstar. He turned to find Ambassador Krethnal of the Volcari standing next to him. The Volcari was a head shorter than Vexstar, with silver fur and ears that stood straight up from his skull. His species were primarily herbivores, but they had survived long enough to develop interstellar travel by being clever and forming alliances with stronger species. "Perhaps not," Vexstar agreed. "They are new to galactic politics. They will learn." "One hopes they learn quickly," Krethnal said. "I have heard rumors about their home system. It is rich in resources, and they have no allies to protect them. The hegemony has already taken notice." Vexstar felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of the hegemony. The Krath hegemony was one of the oldest and most powerful political entities in the galaxy. They were predators in every sense of the word, a species of massive insectoid creatures who had built their civilization on conquest and domination. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply took what they wanted, and anyone who stood in their way was destroyed. The Krath had been quiet lately, content to digest the 3-star systems they had consumed in their last expansion. But if they had noticed the humans and their resource-rich home system, that peace would not last for long. "The humans will need to find protectors," Vexstar said. "Perhaps we should approach them after the ceremony. The Drell Collective could offer them membership in exchange for trade agreements." Krethnal made a sound that was the Volcari equivalent of a snort. "Good luck with that. Every faction in the hall will be making the same offer. The bidding war for human resources has already begun." The ceremony began shortly after. Grand Chancellor Mortek, a massive Threx with mandibles that gleamed like polished metal, stood at the central podium and called the council to order. His voice boomed through the hall, amplified by technology that made it sound like thunder. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Mortek intoned, "we gather today to welcome a new species into our community. These beings have traveled far to stand before us, and they come seeking friendship and understanding. Let us hear them speak." Sarah Chen stepped forward. She was small compared to most of the beings in the hall, barely reaching the chest of the smallest council member. But she stood at the podium as if she belonged there, her eyes moving across the gathered crowd without fear or hesitation. "Thank you, Grand Chancellor," she said. Her voice was soft compared to the booming tones of the Threx, but the translation systems carried it clearly to every corner of the hall. "My name is Sarah Chen, and I speak for the United Nations of Earth. We are honored to be here today, and we hope that this meeting marks the beginning of a long and peaceful relationship between our peoples." She spoke for several minutes about human history, their journey to the stars, and their hopes for the future. Vex, Tar listened with half an ear, more interested in watching the reactions of the other council members. Most were politely attentive, but he could see the calculation behind their eyes. They were already planning how to use the humans, how to exploit their resources and their vulnerability. The Krath delegation was particularly interested. Their ambassador, a hulking creature named Skrixmal, watched the human with unblinking compound eyes. His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought among his kind. Vex, Tar did not like that look. It was the look of a predator measuring its prey. When Chen finished speaking, the floor was open for questions. Several ambassadors rose to ask about human technology, culture, and resources. Chen answered each question calmly and thoroughly, never seeming flustered or uncertain. She was good at this, Vexstar realized. Whatever else humans might be, they were not stupid. Then Skrixmal stood. The hall fell silent. When the Krath ambassador spoke, everyone listened, not out of respect but out of fear. "Human," Skrixmal said, his voice a harsh clicking sound that the translators rendered into words. "I have a question for you. Your species has no natural defenses. You have no claws, no fangs, no armor. How have you survived on your world? What predators do you have, and how do you avoid them?" It was an insulting question, designed to humiliate. By pointing out human weaknesses so publicly, Skrixmal was establishing dominance, showing the entire council that humans were weak and vulnerable. It was a classic predator move, and Vexstar winced internally at the cruelty of it. But Sarah Chen did not seem humiliated. She looked at Skrixmal with an expression that Vex, Tar could not quite read. It was not fear, it was not anger, it was something else, something that made him feel strangely uneasy. "Thank you for your question, Ambassador," Chen said. "It is true that we have no natural weapons. We have no claws or fangs or armor, but you asked about predators on our world. I think there may be some misunderstanding about our place in our ecosystem." She paused, and that strange expression deepened. "You see, Ambassador, we do not avoid predators. On Earth, there are no predators that hunt us, because we have killed them all." The silence that followed Sarah Chen's words was absolute. For a long moment, nobody in the Great Hall moved or spoke. Even the ever-present background hum of the translation system seemed to fade, as if the technology itself was stunned by what it had just processed. Vexstar found himself staring at the human ambassador with all four of his eyes. He must have misheard. The translation must have failed. There was no way a prey species, a soft and defenseless creature like a human, could have said what he thought she had said. But the translation systems were among the most advanced in the galaxy. They did not make mistakes. Skrixmal recovered first. His mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of agitation among the Krath. You claim to have killed all your predators. That is impossible. Every world has an ecosystem, a balance of hunters and hunted. You cannot simply eliminate one side of that balance. And yet we did, Chen replied calmly. I understand this may be difficult to believe, so let me explain. When my ancestors first walked the plains of Earth, they were indeed prey. We were hunted by large cats, by wolves, by bears, and by many other creatures. We had no claws to fight back, no speed to run away, no shells to hide behind. She began to walk slowly as she spoke, moving away from the podium and toward the center of the hall. It was a bold move. In most council species, leaving the safety of the podium was seen as either very brave or very foolish. So we used the only weapon nature gave us, our minds. We learned to make tools. First, sharp stones tied to sticks, then spears that could be thrown from a distance, then bows and arrows. Each generation made better weapons than the last. Chen stopped walking and turned to face the Krath delegation directly. The predators that once hunted us learned to fear us instead. The great cats fled when they saw humans coming. The wolves learned to stay far from our camps, and those that did not learn, those that continued to see us as prey, we killed them. We killed them until there were none left. You expect us to believe this? Skrixmal demanded. A species without natural weapons becoming the dominant predator on their world. I do not expect you to believe anything, Chen said. I am simply telling you the truth, but perhaps some evidence would help. Lieutenant Cooper, please bring up the archive. One of the other humans, a young male with dark skin and short-cropped hair, stepped forward and activated a small device. Suddenly, the center of the hall was filled with holographic images. Pictures of Earth animals appeared one after another, each one labeled with information about its size, its weapons, and its current status. The saber-toothed cat, Chen narrated as an image of a massive feline with enormous fangs appeared. It hunted our ancestors for thousands of years. It is now extinct. We killed the last one roughly 10,000 years ago. The image changed to show a creature that looked like a massive wolf. The dire wolf, another predator of early humans, also extinct, killed by our ancestors. Image after image appeared. Giant bears, massive hyenas, enormous birds with claws like knives. Each one was labeled as extinct, driven to that state by human activity. And it was not just the predators, Chen continued. We also killed the megafauna, the great beasts of our world, mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths. Any animal that was large enough to be a threat or useful enough to be worth hunting, we drove to extinction. We did this with stone tools and fire, long before we developed what you would recognize as technology. The hall was still silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. Before, it had been the silence of disbelief. Now it was the silence of species starting to reassess everything they thought they knew. Vexstar looked around at his fellow ambassadors. The Threks were no longer clicking with amusement. Their mandibles were still, their compound eyes fixed on the holographic images with what might have been concern. The Volcari had gone very quiet, their large ears pressed flat against their skulls in a defensive posture. Even the Mondari, who rarely showed any emotion, seemed to be shifting uneasily. But this is ancient history, Skrixmal said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. What does it matter what your primitive ancestors did? You are civilized now. You have laws. You do not kill anymore. Chen's expression shifted again, and this time Vexstar recognized what he was seeing. It was the look of a teacher who was about to correct a student's very wrong assumption. Ambassador, I think you have misunderstood something fundamental about our species. You seem to believe that our history of violence was a phase, something we grew out of as we became more advanced. This is not accurate. She gestured and the holographic images changed again. Now they showed not animals but human history, wars, battles, armies clashing on fields of blood and mud. After we killed all the predators, we turned on each other. We fought wars for land, for resources, for religion, for politics, for revenge, and sometimes for no reason at all. We developed weapons specifically designed to kill other humans more efficiently. Swords, guns, bombs, nuclear weapons capable of destroying entire cities in an instant. The images showed the mushroom cloud of a nuclear explosion, and several ambassadors made sounds of alarm. In the last century of our recorded history alone, over 200 million humans were killed by other humans in wars and conflicts. We are very, very good at killing things. It is, perhaps, our greatest skill. Chen let that sink in for a moment before continuing. But you are right about one thing. We have laws now. We have agreed as a species to stop killing each other quite so much, not because we became incapable of violence, but because we chose to direct that capability elsewhere. We put our weapons away. We built societies based on cooperation rather than conquest. She looked directly at Scrixmal. We did this not because we are weak, Ambassador, but because we are strong enough to choose not to fight. We are the most dangerous species on our world, and we decided that peace was more valuable than war. That is why we are here today, seeking friendship rather than conquest, because we have already proven that we can conquer anything we set our minds to, and we have decided that there are better uses for our abilities. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Then, slowly, Scrixmal sat back down. His mandibles were still and his compound eyes had lost their predatory gleam. He looked, for the first time since Vexstar had known him, uncertain. Grand Chancellor Mortek cleared his throat, a rumbling sound like stones grinding together. Ambassador Chen, this is a great deal of information to process. Perhaps we should take a short recess to allow the council members to consider what we have heard. Of course, Grand Chancellor, Chen said, her voice returning to its earlier pleasant tone. We will wait. As the council members began to disperse for the recess, Vexstar found himself standing frozen in place. His mind was racing, trying to process everything he had just learned. He had been so certain about humans, prey species, soft, weak, easy targets. Now he was not certain of anything at all. Krethnal appeared beside him again, his silver fur standing on end. Vexstar, the Volcari whispered, did you hear what she said? Did you understand what it means? I heard, Vexstar replied. I am still processing. They killed everything on their world that could hurt them, Krethnal said. Everything. And then they started killing each other because there was nothing left to kill. And they developed nuclear weapons while they were still confined to a single planet. Vexstar nodded slowly. Yes. They are insane, Krethnal whispered. They are completely, utterly insane, and the Krath were going to try to conquer them. Vexstar looked over at the Krath delegation. Scrixmal was conferring with his advisors in rapid, hushed clicks. He did not look confident anymore. He looked worried. I think, Vexstar said slowly, that the Krath may have changed their minds about that. The recess lasted much longer than anyone had expected. What was supposed to be a brief pause for reflection stretched into hours as ambassadors gathered in small groups, discussing what they had learned in hushed voices. The Great Hall had never been so quiet during a council session. Vexstar spent most of the recess in a private meeting room with ambassadors from several other species. They had gathered almost by accident, drawn together by their shared shock and confusion. Now they sat around a circular table, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The classification system is fundamentally flawed, said Ambassador Zornka of the Mondari. His voice was like gravel being poured into a bucket, deep and rough. The Mondari were silicon-based life forms, creatures of living rock who measured time in centuries rather than years. They rarely participated in council debates, considering most matters too trivial to warrant their attention. But today, Zornka had broken his usual silence. We have always divided species into predator and prey based on their physical characteristics, but the humans prove this is inadequate. They evolved as prey, agreed a Threx ambassador named Clickvex. Every physical marker says so. Blunt teeth, no claws, thin skin, eyes on the front of the face, true, but that can be explained by their climbing ancestors. And yet they behave as predators, Vexstar said. Apex predators. They did not just survive on their world, they dominated it completely. They reshaped their entire planet to suit their needs. That is not prey behavior. It goes beyond that, Krethnal said. The Volcari had calmed down somewhat since the initial shock, but his ears were still pressed flat against his skull. Think about what she said. They developed nuclear weapons while still confined to a single planet. Do you understand what that means? They created weapons capable of destroying their own civilization before they even had somewhere else to go. A heavy silence fell over the room. Every species in the galaxy that had achieved interstellar travel had faced the nuclear question at some point in their development. It was a critical threshold, a test that determined whether a civilization would advance to the stars or destroy itself. Most species developed nuclear technology after they had already begun to colonize other worlds, giving them a safety valve if things went wrong. The humans had developed it while still trapped on Earth. They had built weapons that could end their species while they had nowhere else to go, and somehow they had survived. How many civilizations do we know of that failed the nuclear threshold? Vexstar asked quietly. 23 confirmed cases, Zornka replied. Another 47 suspected based on archaeological evidence. All of them destroyed themselves within a century of developing the technology. And the humans passed the threshold, Clickvex said, while fighting wars among themselves, while divided into competing nations, while having no guarantee of survival if things went wrong. They did not just pass it, Krethnal corrected. They sat on the edge of destruction for decades. They pointed those weapons at each other for generations, and then they chose not to use them. They chose to survive. The door to the meeting room opened, and a Threx attendant entered. Ambassadors, the Grand Chancellor has called the Council back into session. There is a matter that requires immediate attention. The ambassadors exchanged worried glances. Emergency sessions during first contact ceremonies were almost unheard of. Something had happened. They returned to the Great Hall to find it buzzing with tension. The human delegation was still present, standing calmly near the central podium. But the Krath delegation was on its feet, and Skrixmal was speaking in rapid, angry clicks that the translators struggled to keep up with. Demand satisfaction for this insult. The hegemony will not be mocked by these primitive creatures. Grand Chancellor Mortek held up a massive claw for silence. Ambassador Skrixmal, please explain to the Council what has occurred. During the recess, we attempted to establish direct communication with the human vessel in orbit, Skrixmal said. We wish to discuss certain matters privately before continuing the public session. But when our ship approached, the humans responded with a threat. Chen stepped forward. Grand Chancellor, I can explain what happened. The Krath vessel approached our ship without identifying itself and without following standard approach protocols. Our captain perceived this as a potential threat and activated our defensive systems. A warning was transmitted asking the Krath vessel to maintain its distance. That is all. A warning, Skrixmal clicked furiously. Your vessel targeted our ship with weapons. It painted us with targeting sensors. That is standard procedure when an unidentified vessel makes an aggressive approach, Chen replied calmly. Our captain followed protocol. No weapons were discharged. No damage was done. It was simply a warning. Your captain threatened a vessel of the Krath hegemony. Skrixmal's voice rose to a near shriek. Do you understand what this means? The hegemony has destroyed species for lesser offenses. The hall fell silent. Vextar felt his hearts beating faster. This was exactly the kind of situation that could spiral out of control. The Krath were proud and quick to anger. If they felt their honor had been insulted, they would respond with overwhelming force. It had happened before, many times. But Sarah Chen did not seem concerned. She looked at Skrix, Mal with that same strange expression she had worn earlier, that look that Vextar now recognized as something very different from fear or submission. Ambassador Skrixmal, she said, her voice still calm and level, let me be very clear about something. The United Nations of Earth did not come to this council to make enemies. We came seeking friendship and cooperation. We have been entirely peaceful and transparent in our dealings. She paused, and when she continued, her voice had taken on a harder edge. But we also did not come here to be intimidated. Your vessel approached our ship in a threatening manner, and our captain responded appropriately. If you had identified yourselves and followed standard protocols, there would have been no incident. The fault lies with your people, not ours. Skrix Mal's mandibles clicked together in what might have been shock. In all his years of threatening and bullying other species, no one had ever responded to him this way. You dare speak to the hegemony like this? You, a species of soft-skinned prey animals with a single planet. I dare, Chen replied, because despite what you seem to think, we are not afraid of you. We have faced worse than the Krath hegemony. We have faced ourselves, and we survived. She took a step closer to the Krath ambassador. You want to know what frightens humans, ambassador? Not creatures like you. We have killed things like you before. We have killed things bigger and stronger and more dangerous than you. We killed them so thoroughly that nothing remains but bones in museums and stories told to children. Another step. What frightens us is ourselves, the knowledge of what we are capable of, the memory of what we have done to each other, to our world, to everything we have touched. We carry that fear with us always, and it makes us careful. It makes us cautious. It makes us try very, very hard to be peaceful. She was now standing directly in front of Skrixmal, looking up at the towering insectoid without flinching. But make no mistake, if you threaten us, if you attack us, if you try to harm our people, we will respond. And you will not like what happens next. The silence in the hall was absolute. Vextar found that he was holding his breath. The entire council was watching this confrontation unfold, and no one seemed to know what to do. Then slowly, Skrixmal took a step backward. His mandibles clicked quietly, but he said nothing. After a long moment, he turned and walked back to his delegation seats without another word. Grand Chancellor Mortek cleared his throat. Well, that was unprecedented. Ambassador Chen, the council thanks you for your candor. Perhaps we should conclude today's session and resume tomorrow after everyone has had time to rest and reflect. That would be acceptable, Chen replied, her voice returning to its pleasant, diplomatic tone as if nothing unusual had happened. We look forward to continuing our discussions. The days that followed the diplomatic incident were unlike anything the Galactic Council had experienced. Usually, when a new species was introduced, the established powers would circle like scavengers, each trying to secure the best deals for resources and territory before their rivals could act. The newcomers, overwhelmed and desperate for allies, would accept whatever terms they were offered. The humans did not follow this pattern. Ambassador Chen and her delegation conducted themselves with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. They listened politely to every offer of protection, nodded thoughtfully at every proposal for trade agreements, and then said they would need time to consider their options. They did not seem desperate. They did not seem worried. They acted as if they had all the time in the galaxy. Vexstar watched these negotiations with growing fascination. He had initially approached the humans with the intention of offering Drell protection in exchange for favorable trade terms. It was a standard arrangement, one that the Drell Collective had made with dozens of weaker species over the centuries. But when he sat down with Chen and her advisors, he found himself being questioned in ways he had not expected. What exactly would Drell protection involve? Chen asked during their second meeting. What forces would you commit to our defense? What response times can you guarantee? What happens if the threat comes from a species more powerful than the Drell? Vexstar found himself fumbling for answers. These were not questions that prey species usually asked. They were strategic questions, the kind of questions a military commander would ask when evaluating potential allies. We have significant military capabilities, he said carefully. The Drell Collective maintains a fleet of over 3,000 warships across our territory. We have defended our allies successfully in multiple conflicts. 3,000 ships, Chen repeated, making a note on her tablet. And how many of those could be deployed to human space in the event of an attack? It would depend on the circumstances. Perhaps 500 if we stripped defenses from other sectors. And the response time. At maximum speed, our fleet could reach your system in approximately 40 standard cycles. Chen nodded slowly, still making notes. 40 cycles, that's about 30 Earth days if I'm calculating correctly. Approximately, yes. And what would you need from us in return for this protection? Vexstar outlined the standard terms: preferential trade agreements, access to human resources, cooperation on scientific research. Chen listened attentively to each point, asked clarifying questions, and then said she would need to consult with her government before making any commitments. It was the same response she gave to every delegation that approached her. The Volcari offered their services as intermediaries and information brokers. The Mondari offered technological exchange. Even some of the smaller species, hopping to align themselves with what they now saw as a potentially powerful player, made their own proposals. Chen listened to all of them and committed to none. The Krath hegemony, notably, made no further attempts at communication. After the confrontation in the Great Hall, Scrix, Mal and his delegation had withdrawn to their quarters and refused all visitors. Rumors spread through the station that the Krath were planning something, but no one knew what. On the 5th day after first contact, something unexpected happened. Vexstar was in his quarters reviewing reports when his communication system chimed with an incoming message. It was from Chen, requesting a private meeting. He agreed immediately and made his way to the human delegation's suite. The human quarters were sparse compared to most diplomatic accommodations. Where other species filled their rooms with elaborate decorations and comfort items from their homeworlds, the humans had brought only the essentials: functional furniture, communication equipment, and not much else. It was, Vexstar thought, the kind of setup that could be packed and moved quickly if necessary. Chen greeted him at the door with a warm smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Ambassador Vexstar, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." They sat facing each other across a simple table. Chen poured 2 cups of a dark liquid that she called coffee and offered one to Vexstar. He declined politely, uncertain if his biology could process the substance. "I wanted to speak with you privately," Chen began, "because out of all the ambassadors we have met, you seem the most genuine." Vexstar was surprised. "I am not certain what you mean." "The others see us as an opportunity," Chen explained. "Resources to be exploited or a new piece on the game board to be controlled. You see us that way too, of course, but you also seem genuinely curious about us. You want to understand what we are, not just what we have." "You are different from what we expected," Vexstar admitted. "When we first saw your species, we assumed you were prey, weak and vulnerable. Everything we have learned since then has challenged that assumption." Chen nodded. Yes, I know, it's a common mistake. Our appearance is deceptive. We evolved to be endurance hunters, you see. We don't need claws or fangs because we don't fight our prey directly. We chase them. We follow them for hours, days sometimes, until they collapse from exhaustion. Then we kill them while they're too tired to resist. Vexstar felt a chill run through his scales. Persistence hunting, he said. We have seen similar strategies in a few species, but none that developed intelligence. We're unique in that regard, Chen agreed. Our bodies are designed for long distance running in hot climates. We can sweat to regulate our temperature, which most animals cannot do. We can run for hours without stopping. Our prey would try to escape, sprint away as fast as they could, but they would tire. They would overheat. And we would still be coming, always coming, never stopping. She took a sip of her coffee. There's a term in human psychology called the uncanny valley. It refers to the feeling of discomfort people experience when they see something that looks almost human, but not quite. A robot that's too realistic, or a corpse, or a very lifelike doll. Something about it triggers a deep, instinctive fear. I have heard of this concept, Vexstar said, wondering where this was going. I think we might be the galaxy's version of that, Chen said. We look like prey. We act like predators. We're familiar enough to seem harmless, but strange enough to be unsettling. The Council doesn't know what to make of us, and that makes everyone nervous. You are correct, Vexstar admitted. The Council is deeply uncertain about how to handle your species. Some want to exploit you before you become too powerful. Others want to destroy you while they still can. And a few, like myself, simply want to understand. Chen set down her cup and leaned forward. That's why I wanted to talk to you, Ambassador, because I think understanding is the key to everything. The galaxy sees us as either prey to be consumed or predators to be feared. Neither view is accurate. Then what are you? Vexstar asked. Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. We are survivors, she said finally. We have survived ice ages and plagues. We have survived famines and floods. We have survived wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own people. We have survived ourselves, which is perhaps the hardest thing of all. And we will continue to survive whatever the galaxy throws at us. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The Krath think they can threaten us into submission. They're wrong. Other species think they can manipulate us into becoming their tools. They're also wrong. We're not interested in being pawns in galactic politics. We're here to find our place among the stars, and we'll do whatever we have to do to secure that place. And what place is that? Vexstar asked. Chen turned back to face him. Equals, she said. Partners. Friends, if possible. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We don't want to dominate other species. We've learned through long and painful experience that cooperation leads to better outcomes than conflict. But we also won't accept being treated as lesser beings. We won't be exploited or controlled or threatened into submission. Those are bold words for a species with one planet and no allies. Perhaps, Chen acknowledged, but I think you're starting to understand that we can back them up, which brings me to the real reason I asked to see you. Ambassador Chen reached into her jacket and withdrew a small data chip, which she placed on the table between them. Vexstar looked at it curiously, his 4 eyes focusing on the tiny device. This contains detailed information about our defensive capabilities, Chen explained. Military forces, weapon systems, tactical doctrines, things we have not shared with the Council. We're giving this to you specifically because we believe you can be trusted to handle it responsibly. Vexstar was stunned. Why would you trust me with such sensitive information? We barely know each other. Because you asked the right questions, Chen said. You wanted to understand us, not just use us. And because we need someone on the Council who knows the truth about humanity, someone who can advocate for us when we're not in the room. We're offering you that role. You want me to be your ally. We want you to be our friend, Chen corrected. Alliances can be broken. Friendships are harder to dissolve. Vexstar hesitated, then reached out and picked up the data chip. "I will review this information," he said carefully. "I make no promises beyond that." Chen smiled. "That's all we ask. Review it, think about it. And then when you're ready, we can talk again about what kind of relationship our peoples might build together." Vexstar returned to his quarters that night with his mind spinning. He inserted the data chip into his private terminal and began reading. What he found kept him awake until the artificial dawn cycle lit up the station. The humans were not lying about their military capabilities. Despite having achieved interstellar travel only recently, they had already built a substantial fleet. Their ships were not as elegant as Drell vessels or as massive as Krath warships, but they were numerous and well-armed. More importantly, their tactical doctrines were unlike anything Tar had seen before. Most species in the galaxy fought wars of maneuver, seeking to outposition their enemies and force decisive battles under favorable conditions. The humans did this too, but they had another doctrine that they called total war. It was a concept that made Vexstar's scales crawl. In total war, there were no civilians. There were no neutral parties. Everything and everyone became a potential target. Factories were destroyed. Food supplies were poisoned. Populations were displaced and starved. The entire enemy society was attacked, not just its military forces. The goal was not to win battles but to break the enemy's will to fight, to make the cost of continued resistance so unbearable that surrender became the only option. The humans had done this to themselves, multiple times. They had burned their own cities, slaughtered their own people, and devastated their own world in pursuit of victory. And they had won. They had emerged from each conflict stronger than before, having learned new ways to wage war more effectively. Vexstar thought about the Krath hegemony. The Krath were fearsome warriors, yes. They were large and strong and utterly ruthless. They had conquered dozens of species through intimidation and brute force. But their wars were limited affairs. They conquered territory, extracted resources, and moved on. They did not fight total wars because they did not need to. No one had ever pushed them that far. If the Krath attacked humanity, they would expect a conventional conflict. They would expect the humans to defend their territory, perhaps surrender after suffering sufficient losses, and then submit to hegemony rule. That was how wars worked in the galaxy. But the humans would not fight that kind of war. They would fight the only kind of war they knew how to fight. They would fight to the death, and then they would find ways to keep fighting even after they should have been defeated. They would never surrender. They would never submit. They would burn their own worlds before letting the Krath have them. And the Krath, for all their fearsome reputation, had never faced an enemy like that. The next morning, Vexstar requested a private meeting with Skrixmal. The Krath ambassador was reluctant, but eventually agreed. They met in a neutral conference room, surrounded by the sterile walls of the station. "What do you want, Drell?" Skrixmal clicked irritably. "I have no patience for games." "I want to give you some advice," Vexstar said. "As a fellow member of the council, as someone who has watched the hegemony operate for many years. I do not need advice from prey lovers." "Then consider this a warning." Vexstar leaned forward. "Do not attack the humans." Skrixmal's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "You think to frighten me with tales of their savagery. I have heard the stories. They mean nothing. The hegemony has crushed many savage species." "You have crushed species that wanted to survive," Vexstar said. "Species that would surrender when defeat became inevitable. The humans are not like that. They will not surrender. They will not submit. They will fight you until one side or the other is completely destroyed. Then we will destroy them." "Can you?" Vexstar asked quietly. "Can the hegemony commit to a war of total annihilation against a species that will never stop fighting? A war that might last generations. A war that will cost you more than you could ever gain, no matter how many resources you extract from human space." Skrixmal was silent for a long moment. His compound eyes flickered, processing. "You have information," he said finally. "Information about their capabilities." "I have information about their history," Vextar corrected. "About what they have done to each other in the name of victory. And I am telling you, as someone who has no reason to lie, that if you attack them, you will regret it. The hegemony might win in the end, but the cost will be higher than anything you have ever paid before, and there is a very real chance that you will not win at all." The Krath ambassador said nothing. He sat in silence for a long time, his mandibles still, his compound eyes fixed on some distant point. Then, without a word, he stood and left the room. The council reconvened 3 days later for the formal conclusion of the first contact ceremony. The Great Hall was once again filled with representatives from across the galaxy, but the atmosphere was very different from the first day. There was no mocking laughter, no predatory sizing up of the newcomers. Instead, there was something that resembled respect, or perhaps fear. Grand Chancellor Mortek called the session to order and invited the human delegation to approach the podium. Ambassador Chen walked forward, flanked by her colleagues, her head held high. "Ambassador Chen," Mortek said formally, "the Galactic Council has considered your request for membership. After much deliberation, we have decided to accept the United Nations of Earth as a full member of this body, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Chen bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Grand Chancellor. Humanity is honored to join this assembly. We look forward to contributing to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy." "There is one more matter," Mortek continued. "Ambassador Skrix, Mal of the Krath hegemony, has requested permission to address the council." The hall fell silent. Vextar felt his heart skip a beat. He had hoped his warning would be enough, but he could not be certain. The Krath were unpredictable at the best of times. Skrixmal rose from his seat and walked slowly to the center of the hall. He stopped a few meters from Chen, his towering form casting a shadow over the human ambassador. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Then Skrixmal lowered his massive head, in what was unmistakably a gesture of respect. "On behalf of the Krath hegemony," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I wish to extend our congratulations to humanity on their acceptance into the Council. We look forward to a relationship of mutual respect and cooperation." The hall erupted in murmurs of astonishment. The Krath did not offer respect. They did not extend congratulations. They dominated and conquered and destroyed. This was unprecedented. Chen met Skrixmal's compound eyes without flinching. "Thank you, Ambassador. Humanity values strength and respects those who know how to use it wisely. We believe the hegemony and Earth have much to offer each other, and we look forward to exploring those possibilities." Skrixmal inclined his head again, then returned to his seat. The moment passed, but its significance was not lost on anyone present. Later that evening, after the ceremony had concluded and the delegations had dispersed, Vextar found himself standing on an observation deck, looking out at the endless field of stars. Chen joined him there, 2 cups of the dark human beverage in her hands. "Try it this time," she said, offering him a cup. "I had our medical team analyze your biology. It should be safe, and I think you might like it." Vextar accepted the cup and took a small sip. The liquid was bitter and hot, but not unpleasant. He felt a strange energy beginning to flow through him, sharpening his thoughts. "What did you say to Skrix Mal?" Chen asked. "We heard that you met with him privately." "I told him the truth," Vextar replied. "I told him what kind of war he would be starting if he attacked your people. I do not think he liked what he heard." Chen nodded slowly. "Thank you. You may have prevented a war today." "I may have only delayed one," Vextar said. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, and your people have made many other species nervous. Not everyone will react as the Krath did today." "We know," Chen said. "We're not naive. We understand that some will see us as threats, others as opportunities. we'll have to navigate carefully in the years ahead. But you are not afraid. Chen smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. No, we've come too far and survived too much to be afraid now. Whatever the galaxy throws at us, we'll face it the same way we've faced everything else, together, and we'll survive. They stood together in silence for a while, watching the stars burn in the endless darkness. Two very different species, from two very different worlds, beginning a friendship that would reshape the galaxy. The Council had learned something important that day. Humans were not prey. They were not predators. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They were survivors, and they had come to the stars to stay. And perhaps, Vexstar thought as he finished his coffee, that was exactly what the galaxy needed.